Hello students, we are going to start our next module, which is module 6, which will deal with surface flows and hydrographs. So again, going back to our original hydrological cycle from where we started, we learned that various components of hydrological processes that we are interested as engineers, it includes evaporation, it includes infiltration, it includes groundwater flow as well as subsurface flow, and finally, one of the most important phenomena that we are interested to model in as part of engineering hydrology is that what is the quantity of surface runoff that is getting routed through rivers and channels and ultimately reaching to our hydroelectric plant so that we can estimate what is going to be the potential of water generation, or if some city is located near to a river, what is the extent of flooding we can expect whenever we have an event of extreme precipitation. Also, when precipitation event just starts, if we look into that what are the various processes that dominate at various time points, we see that as soon as precipitation starts, some water would go into ground in form of infiltration, and we have already learned handsful of method to estimate that rate of infiltration. Also, there would be some depressions onto the surface, and some water would either get retained or some water would either get detained. Retention is more of a permanent phenomena. That means that if there is a big pothole and this water gets trapped there, and the only way for this water to go out is through evaporation. On the other hand, if we have a smaller trench and water just gets retained temporarily here, and as soon as more precipitation starts, we have some overflows happening from this ditch, and we say that this is a temporary phenomena and hence this is called as detention. But one thing is for sure, that whenever there are depressions on surface of land, which generally happens in forms of valleys, and if we are talking about urban settings, we have potholes on the road. So initial part is governed primarily by infiltration and filling up those depressions that are created. Now, as more and more precipitation is happening, what would happen? Our water table, groundwater table will also start rising. And again, initial part as infiltration is at peak, once water that is infiltrating from top of the surface reaches to the layers below the top layer, we would see that groundwater is coming up. And now when groundwater table reaches up to a point that this entire soil is now saturated. After that, we see that prime flows take place in form of groundwater flow, or groundwater flow becomes a dominant source of flows into our rivers. And finally, when entire soil thrust is satisfied, all the potholes that are present on road are filled, we have the dominant phase of channel flow if the storm is still continuing. And channel flow is primarily contributed by the flow that is happening on these slopes. So for example, when precipitation will happen on these mountains, it will flow along the direction of deepest descent. And if you remember, in one of the lectures we also told you the grid that we typically have in GIS, which we fill with 9 numbers to determine what would be the vector or direction of flow. And ultimately all this water tend to converge to the points of minimum elevation, and as that convergence happens, we get to see the streams or channels getting born because of confluence of this water from various phenomena that is on the surface. Also, ultimately our groundwater and unsaturated flow that is happening would also join our streams, and hence we have to also say that in channels some flow is also contributed by the flow that is coming beneath the groundwater, and we will talk about that kind of flow in more detail. So we have to consider two cases. That let us say that precipitation happens with intensity I over strata where the initial infiltration capacity is F. Now there are two cases possible, that are rate of precipitation I is greater than a rate of infiltration. To avoid confusion, I am saying that F is infiltration capacity, specifically initial infiltration capacity. I is our rate of precipitation, which we typically get from hydrograph. Now, when I is much greater than F, that would mean that only a small portion of water would be soaked up by the earth, And this typically happens when we have concrete lining here. So there is concrete all over the place and some precipitation is happening over the length L at rate I, and there is a small infiltration. So we can simply say that in such surfaces we can ignore all other depression losses and so on, and we can directly estimate the rate of runoff generation, because I is also rate, F is also rate. So this becomes rate of runoff generation is equal to I minus F, and this is typically applicable on impervious layers. This phenomena was first studied in mathematical detail by Horton, and we have already learned about Hortonian's equation. That's why this kind of overland flow that is being generated because of top layer getting saturated, because here there is this layer, we can say that since there is no air that is there into this concrete layer or impervious layer, that by definition means we have reached the saturation. So that kind of flows are called as Hortonian overland flows, and they typically happen in urban setting, specifically when we are talking about impervious layers. And you clearly see that if we don't have to account for infiltration, entire hydrological modeling for urban settings become easier. Let us move to more complex case, that is what would happen when our infiltration capacity is greater than the rate of precipitation that is happening over an area, and we will try to understand this with help of the downstream of a hill. So let us consider that we have certain soil strata which is confined by the impervious bed. So this all indicates the impervious rock layer, and water cannot go past through that, because whenever we are doing some modeling we have to make some assumptions so that our life doesn't become unnecessarily complicated without adding much value, and that's where we say that we have to take a confined system or a control volume. Now what would happen is that when initial precipitation would start, some of the soil would be thrusty. Let us say that initially that this entire soil is dry. So what would happen initially, if water table is at the level of the river, so this is our river, and initially what we will see that whatever precipitation is happening under the condition that our infiltration capacity is greater than I, we will see that lot of water will ultimately start soaking in, and the water table will gradually start rising as our wetting front moves downward, and a point will come when saturation will happen from below. If you look into the case of Hortonian's overflow, saturation was already set up here. Here saturation is happening from beneath, and when this water table almost reaches top of the surface, we see that this kind of overflow would be generated along the slopes, and this flow is saturated overland flow. And the key difference between Hortonian's overland flow and saturated overland flow is again the direction from which saturation is happening. And this is the phenomena that is quite interesting, that from both from soil mechanics perspective as well as from the hydrological perspective. Now, as far as theory is concerned, we have already learned about something called as ponding time. So for example, if I give you a hyetograph, so hyetograph is intensity versus time and so on, and you know that there are various methods to estimate the rate of infiltration, and one of them, the easiest and quickest method, is looking into the Hortonian's equation or the Hortonian decay, where we can write this as F equal to F naught plus Fc minus F naught minus Fc e raised to power minus kt. So you can always check these parameters going back, but this is basically an exponential decay equation. And if we know the characteristics of hyetograph as well as some method of infiltration, we can easily establish what is going to be the ponding time. And this ponding time is essentially based on the fact that when we have saturation from below, and whatever is happening after ponding time is essentially constituting this saturated overland flow. And you have already done some some examples based on estimating the ponding time. Now, what would happen is that we will sit at this stream and we will put our measuring gauge. We are interested to measure the discharges, and that's what we have been covering into various topics that are being discussed by your colleagues or students in this class, where they are presenting some of the field techniques that how we can measure the stream flow at a particular point in a river, and the end result of these measurements are typically presented in form of a hydrograph. So hydrograph is basically variation of discharge, which is in meter cube per second with respect to time, and this is measured particular point at particular point in the channel or stream under consideration. And next part of our course on hydrology will focus on a lot on developing the quantitative hydrographs for storms of various depths as well as duration. And you have already learned about these depths and duration when you were developing IDF or DDF curves into some of your assignments. Now, with that background, let us try to understand that what would impact this hydrograph before we go into more technical details of understanding these hydrographs. So the first and foremost thing that would matter whenever we are drawing hydrograph of a stream is physiological characteristics of our watershed as well as climatic variables. So for example, precipitation is important, that how this curve would rise and how this will fall. Rate of evaporation is important because that will essentially govern that during the total duration of the storm, how much water is indeed able to reach the river, and is going to impact the volume of water that we can essentially calculate as the area under this hydrograph. And third thing that is going to affect is humidity, because evaporation, for example, depends on humidity, and humidity controls lot of other atmospheric processes. And then when we talk about humidity, one can argue then why we don't consider wind separately. So all the processes that we have talked so far into the course of hydrology so far are going to be the climatic variables that are going to impact the shape as well as the volume under this curve. But here we are more interested into the physiological characteristics, because I have mentioned that we are essentially dealing with watershed. We will have some confining boundary that whatever is happening into this region stays into this region. So we have to understand that how the shape of this region is going to impact the shape of our hydrographs. So if we talk about specific hydrographs, which we call as storm hydrographs, storm hydrographs essentially means that once precipitation or a storm passes by, how this discharge curve is going to look with respect to time. And we are essentially interested into direct runoff hydrograph after removing all the contributions from base flow and groundwater flow, because base flow and groundwater flow that were happening before the storm, they have nothing to do with the storm. And here we are interested to know that how a particular storm is going to cause flooding of what magnitude and what depth and so on. So we will remove that base flow and we will learn the techniques to do that. So when we talk about this storm hydrographs, one of the first characteristic that is going to impact the shape of our hydrographs is definitely shape of basin. So for example, if we have basin of this shape, we typically observe that for same channel density or same channel layout, the hydrographs are more skewed towards the skewness of this watershed. So for example, if this watershed is more funneled into this direction, we would see that peak of our hydrograph would shift onto that skewed side. Similarly, if we look into hydrograph of this shape and water is flowing in this direction based on the elevation map, so what we would have here, we will have some flows happening here, and again we will have a skewness more onto that side wherever we have more of a tapering. And that's where we say that shape of a watershed critically depends how our hydrograph is going to look like, even keeping the climatological characteristics same. Now the second thing that impacts the hydrographs are size of basins, because whenever precipitation happens, it generally happens non-uniformly, and even if it is happening uniformly, our basin is going to have some non-uniform characteristics. So for example, there is a river that is flowing into our watershed. So let me draw watershed again, and I will draw that river. So we will see that initially, as the hydrograph starts developing, only certain portions of watershed, specifically which are near to the river or near to the mouth, assuming that precipitation is happening throughout this watershed, they are going to contribute towards generation of the overland flow or channel flow. So initially, up to certain time t1, only the area that I am highlighting right now is contributing towards generation of the hydrograph at this point. So if I plot q with respect to time, as the time progresses, more and more area in this hydrograph, this it starts progressing, because when we talk about overland flow or even we talk about base flow, all these flows take some time, or they are characterized by the travel time within the basin. And as more and more area starts contributing, we get to see the peak. And once this precipitation stops, we see a receding limb, because now water is depleting, or the amount of storage is now rapidly flowing through a point, and ultimately we would again reach the state as if no precipitation has happened before. Now, whenever our basin is smaller, in that case, overland flow without joining channel flow generally dominates generation of this hydrograph. So for example, if our basin is very small, something like this, and our gauge is here, so most of the water that would reach here, it would not wait to find the stream, but it would eventually reach just by the natural action of gravity and without becoming part of the stream or river. Whereas in larger watershed, if you look at the points that are farther away from our measuring site, the points would ultimately find enough time to join the river, and hence flows in larger watersheds is typically channel flow or stream flow. In smaller watersheds, we typically have the overland flow, and we have already talked about Houghtonian's overland flow as well as a saturated overland flow. So we are clear about that size is going to impact, shape is going to impact. The third important factor that is going to determine shape of our hydrograph is going to be slope. If we have steeper slopes, in steeper slopes, we would see that water would race towards the outlet, or the point where we are marking here is end of this watershed, and all the water that is flowing through these rivers would ultimately pass through that, and hence peak is achieved much early and peak is achieved sharper whenever slopes are steep. And this is a common sense that if water is flowing on a bridge versus water is flowing on a road, you would clearly see that bridge would get drier much faster as compared to a plain road segment. And that's where when we talk about flooding because of precipitation entirely, our areas into hilly regions, they drain off very quickly and we don't see stagnant or puddles of water after precipitation. Wherever, if we talk about Gujarat or places in North India, even a small precipitation sometimes result in a huge deluge or a flood like situation, because we are getting entire outflow as Houghtonians runoff. Nothing is seeping because we have large jungles of urbanization, and our slopes are also not steep. So what we get is that we get enough time that entire flow is we are able to witness over a longer period of time. Then, as I have said, that land use, of course, is an important factor to determine. So if we are talking about an urbanized watershed, you will see that there is a steeper slope as well as a faster recession. On the other hand, uh, when we talk about the same terrain where slope and everything is same, but we have a lot of vegetation, you would see that lot of losses happen in form of infiltration or retention by plants. So we have longer time base as well as less magnitude of peaks. And management of flood essentially also calls about reducing our urban or concrete footprint and going towards more plantation of trees so that we can make this peak much lower as well as increase the time base to reduce the impact of flooding. Now we are talking about the various characteristics that how the shapes and characteristics of hydrological uh, uh, hydrographs are going to get impacted. So in this discussion, it is also important to include the parameter of drainage density. Now by now you would know that if drainage density is higher, that would mean that the drainage density would bring water much quickly to our outlet, and hence we are going to have much pronounced uh, peak as well as much faster recession. On the other hand, if drainage density is less, that is, we have less number of rivers, only one river is there, we are going to have characteristics essentially like that that peak would have diminished value as well as base would be longer.